I used to be young once, and it's encouraging and energizing to be in such company. I think I would like to, though, mention that it's still, the key ingredient is still old-fashioned sheer courage and bravery. There's no substitute for that. If you look at what happened in Bangladesh in July and early August of 2024, a mass awakening, a student-led uprising, at its core were young people who put their lives at risk, people who were not activists in the traditional sense of the word. I think of Abu Saeed, the gentleman, he just stood bare-chested in an iconic pose to be shot dead. And then you have a video of the policeman saying to his boss, I don't know what to do, sir. I shoot one and more come in my direction. They just do not go backwards. I'm thinking of Mr. Mir Mugdho. He's a freelancer. He was a university student. He has a 5-star rating on Fiverr. He used to do freelance software work. And he was just distributing water to the other protesters. And you see the video of the tear gas hitting him, and he's trying to wipe his eyes and asking who needs water. Shot dead. You should look up, if you can, a letter a school student, Anas, Shahriar Khan Anas, wrote to his mother saying, Mum, I'm sorry I cannot stay at home. I know you've asked me to stay, but I can't. They're killing my brothers and sisters. I may not be directly related to the cause, but I have to be out there. And if I don't return, please forgive me, but please also feel proud of what I've done. Anas did not return. All of these are documented, well documented. We invited the UN High Commission of Human Rights, Human Rights Watch, all other independent, the foreign media to come and just document what you see and write it down. Because we don't know, our perception may be contaminated. We may be misremembering things, but go and look up and read the documentation of these people. And I think you'll realize that that is the reason when we talk about a social movement, it is about emotion. And the emotion that courage can trigger is incredible. What started as a movement by a small group of people in a public university, the contagion effect of emotion, private universities joined in. Parents joined in the end. Diaspora joined in. So that is how a movement flares. So it's a little hard for me to stay intellectual on this topic, but that's basically the backdrop on which we find ourselves in. I am a member of an interim government. We're handing over to an elected government next month. Government-led, we're extremely fortunate to be led by Nobel Peace Laureate, Professor Muhammad Yunus. And he's taken a very deliberate, measured approach to the transition. And maybe I can talk a little bit about how we're responding. Don't want to take too much time. So my first message to governments around the world is, I know most of you are thinking of this topic as a risk issue. Oh my God, if I don't pay attention, how do I manage and control and contain this risk? And that is true. This is a risk that you ignore at your peril. But there's also an enormous positive opportunity here to harness the zeal and the zest and the energy that you mentioned, the commitment that people have into the day-to-day functioning of government, because that is what government should be about. And the core, the response, how should we respond? Again, going back to the old-fashioned tenets of good governance. What do we mean by that? Let me just number a few of those. First of all, we need to make sure laws and legislation, there are safeguards built into them so that the extremes and excesses of bad governance do not flare up. You don't have an elected government turning autocrat afterwards. So we have, as part of our reform measures, we've enacted ordinances and laws. For example, you can never shut down the internet again. Government can't do that. We have a police commission which puts a layer in between the Prime Minister and the Chief of Police so that it's not so easy to say shoot on sight. Or the police commission is an independent grievance mechanism where if the politicians ask the police to do something that's politically motivated, they have somewhere to go if they get fired or if there's reprisals against them. So a whole lot of independent judiciary, all the other distributed powers, we've packaged that into a referendum question, and it'll be put to the vote next month alongside the parliamentary election. So that's number one, laws and regulations. Number two is the practice of transparency and accountability in the day-to-day functions of government. Many governments are afraid of information. They're afraid of creating a firestorm if I divulge too much information. The antidote to that is even more information. So accountability and really having almost corporate-style KPIs. Every ministry should be like a publicly listed company publishing their annual reports and develop a culture of information sharing in peacetime so that when there is a crisis, people don't start questioning the credibility of your information because you've contaminated your credibility earlier on. So that's important. Third point is, my understanding is that young people are fed up of slogans and motherhood and apple pie statements. You've got to have some KPIs, measurables, outcomes, and hold yourself accountable for where you're headed. And I see countries that have Vision 2030 and other goals, and I really like that, and I don't think we have had the chance to do that. So if you have a North Star and then some intermediate milestones, I think it can really rally people in an inclusive way. Related to that is civil servants. The government's run by civil servants, public administration. You need a proper appraisal, performance appraisal systems for civil servants, and you'd be amazed how many of them do not have that, and how many of them wish they had it, so that they're not held hostage to the whims of their bosses in the day-to-day, that they can really point to objective performance metrics. Fifth, the tone matters. It's the tone that makes the music. You cannot gaslight or talk down and not give dignity to people when they come to you. And so I think if you patronize, you've lost whatever the merit of your message. Many of these movements that started small and flared up actually flared up because someone in a position of authority has just insulted people, insulted the intelligence of people. Related to that, and I wanted to touch on representation you mentioned. So clearly we wanted representation after the uprising, and we had Professor Yunus made sure that members of the student leaders, at least 3 of them, were members of the cabinet running ministries, which was incredible. You imagine the shock to the system, 20-somethings running massive ministries with permanent secretaries reporting up to them. And we've done that with the reform commissions. Many of the reform commissions, the Labour Commission, the Women Affairs Reforms Commission, Judicial Constitution, you've got members of youth in there. But I think representation did not always result in inclusion of their voices. I see good cases and I see bad cases. I see the bad cases where they're sitting around the table, but we fell back on the old norms where the older people speak first. I think they should speak last. They speak first, and then they kind of ossify the agenda, and then everyone else feels compelled to agree with them. And if you disagree with them, then you are the impolite young upstart, and you have no shot at getting, no chance at getting heard again. I've discovered that age is inversely correlated with listening skills. So the older you are, the less you want to listen, because I've seen it all. I was 30 years old once, so there's nothing that you can tell me that I haven't already. That kind of an attitude. So we need deliberate ways of designing meetings. How does the chair work? And behavioral science has a lot to offer in that field. And then the other risk is the young people come in and then they get used to the trappings and structures of office and they start behaving exactly like the previous generation instead of the new one. On the positive side, you should look at one particular commission in Bangladesh. It's the Commission of Inquiry on Enforced Disappearances. And there is one young woman in that committee, Nabila Idris, a young PhD, now an academic, Dr. Nabila Idris. My God, she's now one of my heroes. You should look her up online, look at the report that she's written. And if there's ever a definition of speaking truth to power, going to generals and basically saying, we think your people may have been involved in enforced disappearances. Can I ask you some tough questions? Can I check, was this the room where people were detained in? The way you get it done, unbelievable, you know, a real role model. I guess the last thing I would say is that digital platforms, governments should welcome them, and we're still squeamish about it. I'm toying with the idea, don't hold me to it, that when I go back, rather than do a press briefing on Davos, why don't I do it on a digital platform? Every citizen can put in questions and I talk to them about what I've seen here. I don't know, you know, how safe or unsafe that is when I'm thinking about it right now. But it's a double-edged sword, because you also need to build literacy amongst people on how to deal with misinformation, disinformation, weaponized disinformation, particularly in the world of AI. And for that, you need deliberate movements. I would hope that you guys, global shapers, would self-organize and really build that muscle amongst yourselves so that you are not exploited, your energy and your zest is not exploited by polarizing politicians through online platforms. So sorry for the length that I've taken, but that's...
But it was robust, and I think we all just received a bit of a masterclass and very structured, so thank you for that. I'm struck by the question of the role of emotion in social movements and in politics.
You can't stay angry all the time. You know, I look at Mayor of New York, Mamdani, and some of the issues he talks about are really painful issues for people in society. But he's got this smile on him all the time. And maybe excessive, I don't know. But it's, there is something to be said about you can sustain humor and levity a lot longer than anger. It just can be consuming. But emotion is very important for me. So first of all, at inception, after the uprising, new interim government, myself, first person to fly into the country at the invitation of Professor Yunus to try and help, and lots of others have stepped forward. Virtually none of us with any experience in government, and it was purely driven by emotion. But the emotion I feel now is also it's strong, and the emotion is really around the fact that we mess up every day, and therefore we fail the martyrs, those who killed themselves, who were injured through that process. And you go, am I betraying them every time I fail? Because you do. And you can't change systems overnight. If you start with a system that is, let's say, 80% corrupt, and you manage to make it 60% corrupt, do you feel good about the fact that you've doubled the space of non-corrupt space? Or do you feel really bad that you're still presiding over a 60% corrupt system?
That's an excellent point.
What do I do? People come to me and say, this is going on, that injustices happen right now, under our government, at the moment. I hope it happens less. I hope it doesn't happen because of the government. But I can't change society overnight. But I'm responsible for it. And that emotion is a combination of guilt and frustration and I don't know what. But it is something that I grapple with all the time. And I hope people will realize that it is, an uprising can be overnight, but changing a system is a process. You have to stay focused on the direction of travel. And if you're lucky, you have an inspiring leader like I do. But it can get, on an emotional front, it can be quite draining and energizing and all of those things.